poetry tour that I've been doing. If you haven't seen any of the others that I've been doing, essentially I'm just going through my shelves before moving house and just showing you kind of the chaos of how they're organised at the moment, and then once we're settled in the new place, I'll try and quickly show you how they're organised there. But yeah, I'll make my way through. If you can see, there's just kind of this row on the top here, which I'll try and focus on to begin with today, and I'll see if I can tackle some of this. We'll see how long it takes. I'll get right into it. So we have a few kind of, we have some things on the top here. Let's see what these are first. This is just kind of a little leaflet, a sort of memento, I suppose, from an event I went to. And this is a sort of a poetry broadsheet. So as you can see, it's got sort of these poems like that, on both sides. And I have this because I'm in it. There's a sonnet by me there, which is quite cool. But yeah, some of the other things in here are quite cool as well. And I thought it was quite cool to be doing broadsheets in the 21st century. And then there's a Welsh, they don't just publish poetry, but they're sort of respected for their poetry, a publisher called Seren. And these are just three sort of pamphlets by them that I have. So there's a pamphlet of poems from Cardiff, which is where I'm living at the moment. There's some great poems about Cardiff in here and the surrounding area, from some great, I think mainly Welsh poets. And then this is a great little pamphlet called Translating Mountains by Yvonne Reddick, and this is really wonderful, and it's kind of dealing with loss and grief through memory of mountaineering, because more or less all men, maybe women too, I can't remember, but sort of past generations of a family have all been really into mountaineering, and many have died following that pursuit. And so this is just her dealing with that history, and it's really wonderful. I know I might reread this little pamphlet and make a video about it, because I was quite blown away by it actually. And then poems from Snowdonia, which is the area of Wales that I grew up in, so I picked this up for other sort of nostalgic, sentimental reasons. And then this is a little poetry journal that I think has gone bust now, which is quite sad. They only ever put out like 6 or 7 volumes. It's the Found Poetry Review, so a review of poetry that's just found poetry. So whether that's like Erasure or Centos or whatever. It was quite cool. Then we have these older looking books. This is a book of narrative verse, sort of an old sort of pocket hardback from Oxford University Press, and it's just got loads of excerpts or relatively short narrative poems in it. A subject I'm kind of interested in and trying to work out maybe where the history of narrative poetry is going. Then what we have here, we have the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, so sort of Fitzgerald's version of this. And then this is the Golden Treasury, so just I don't really know much about this. I think this is a book that was bought as a kind of ornament for mine and Jasmine's wedding, and so we decided to hold on to it. We held on to quite a lot of them actually, mainly because they look cool, but some of them sound cool too, and if it's poetry I might dig into it. We have a few more now, hopefully getting a bit more interesting. This is this is the Fireside Book of David Hope. This is mainly quite light verse, it was just given to me by a friend, but there are a couple of poems I quite enjoyed in here, it's kind of a cosy book. Then we have, this is a great poetry anthology put together by Andrew Motion called Here to Eternity, it's just one of those poetry anthologies that strives to be like the poetry anthology, what I really respect about this is, you know, just the range of poetry in here. There's so much translated poetry in here, and a lot of it's contemporary, but you know, it goes back to some of the classics, and yeah, it's really good. Then I got this partly just for the cover, but I thought it was a quite nice theme for a narrative. This is sort of like the nation's favourite animal poems, BBC Books series of like the nation's favourite ... poems. And this is the animals edition. And it's just got loads of poems about animals, both real and made up. Then a little kind of learn by heart poetry book. Yeah, sort of poems that might be easy to memorise. Then this is the selected poems of Robert Browning, kind of an old hardback, sort of pocket hardback that I picked up, and yeah, I'm still not sure where I stand with Robert Browning, but well, I love Child Roland to the Dark Tower came, but yeah, I'm still not sure about most of his dramatic monologues, which is where people say his strength was, but yeah, I'm not there yet. Then we have a few interesting books here. We have probably one of my favourite poetry books. This is the Penguin Book of Modern American Verse, and this was kind of my introduction to you know, T.S. Eliot, Marianne Moore, Ezra Pound, William Carlos Williams. There's quite a few other great people in here. There's Carl Sandburg, Emily Dickinson's in here, because I think at the time a lot of her work was still being published kind of for the first time, because it took so long for a lot of her stuff to be published. So I think this came out in the 50s, and yeah, it's just a good reference point for me. Then we have sort of selected poems and lyrics by Leonard Cohen, which is something I love dipping in and out of. This is a little sort of a little anthology, a kind of crowd-funded anthology that my sister was included in, called Beyond the Pain, Views from 2020, and it's just people, you know, it's like poems about 2020. Yeah. Then there's this Penguin Modern Poets 1 with Lawrence Durrell, Elizabeth Jennings and R.S. Thomas in it, which I haven't managed to touch yet, but yeah, I think they're all poets that, from the sound of things, I'd be interested in. Then this is a great collection of poetry. This is Turner by David Daberdeen, and yeah, I think the title poem is what I remember the best, Turner, which kind of deals with Turner's painting, The Slave Ship, and it's fascinating and haunting and brutal, but really great. Then another one of my favourite anthologies I've read recently is the Penguin Book of the Prose Poem, and the prose poem is, yeah, quite an interesting form. It seems almost oxymoronic, almost, but yeah, it was interesting for me because it gives you the full range, really, of what the prose poem can do, and leaves you to maybe try to understand yourself, make up your own opinions about what makes a good prose poem. And I came away from it thinking that, in a way, what makes up a good prose poem is the same as what makes a good poem, and you know, you can have something written in verse, it could be rhyming and everything, and it still seem flat and boring and unfulfilled. And I think the same comes, the same is true for a prose poem, that you know, it's just when it works, and I don't think you can try to push it too hard. I don't know. Anyway, then we have some more Alice Oswald. So I think in the last one we had a couple of her books, and then this is one of her more recent collections, Falling Awake, which I love. One of my favourite all-time collections of poetry. Then we have States of the Body, produced by Love, by Nisha Ramaya. I've brought this up before, and I'm just kind of a bit perplexed by this book, to be honest. I don't really know what to make of it. yeah, found it quite confusing, but there were some really good parts in it. Let's see. Then we have, oh yeah, Vertigo and Ghost by Fiona Benson, another fairly recent poetry collection, and yeah, it's really good. The first half is called Zeus. It's kind of a sequence of poems, and you know, in classical mythology, Zeus is kind of promiscuous, to say the least. This sequence frames him very squarely as just, you know, a rapist, basically. And it's very brutal, quite hard to read, but kind of important. And yeah, I found myself kind of shrinking in my seat a bit as I was reading it, which I actually think is a good thing. And I think if particularly a man reading that, if you're not shrinking in your seat reading it a bit, then I think there must be something wrong with you, because yeah, she's just so brutal and just, yeah, to the bone with it all. But then the second half is a total tone shift almost, and it moves from this non-specific kind of past into the present, and into her kind of daily life as a mother, and dealing with depression and things like that. But there's also just a lot of compassion in that second half, which seems to just complete the whole collection kind of emotionally. It kind of fills the void that maybe you're feeling in the first half, with all these brutal, really sharp poems at the beginning. Yeah, I think it just works really well within itself, and it kind of completes itself, and it's, yeah, really wonderful, really beautiful. So yeah, that's I've probably been going on too long about it, but that's Vertigo and Ghost by Fiona Benson, and I heartily recommend it. And this is called My Voice, Finding Who I Truly Am, a collection of poems by Hannah Glover. I think this is like a self-published thing that I just picked up. I haven't read it cover to cover. It was, you know, okay. Then this is I is a long memoried woman by Grace Nichols, which is a sequence of poems, sort of telling the story, or kind of, yeah, telling the story of the female slave experience in the Caribbean, which yeah, it's kind of horrific and awful, but it's done really well in this. I haven't read it for quite a few years, but it's a really good collection of poems. Then we have Histories by Christopher Meredith, another Welsh poet, and this is yeah, just a really great, really well done collection of poems. Yeah, I'm trying to remember if there's anything to say about it other than that. At the moment, I can't think of anything, but it's good. Then a couple of poetry collections by Alva Darcy, who was one of my sort of teachers and lecturers at university. She taught poetry workshops, and this is her most recent collection called Insistence, which was shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot Prize, and it's really good. The first poem in here, I just love the sound of the title. Let's see if I can find it. Ansel Adams Aspens. Yeah, that's great. But so that's Insistence, and then this is her first collection, Imaginary Menagerie, and yeah, she's just very good, very quirky, but very clever as well. This is another lecturer from uni. He put out this pamphlet like back in the 70s and then didn't publish any poetry for ages. And this is Workings by Robert Walton, and I just found this second hand, and I was like, oh, I know that guy. So I bought it to see what his earlier stuff was like. Yeah, it's quite good. Right, and then we have This Is Not a Rescue by Emily Blewett. I think I brought this up recently. Yeah, a very solid debut collection from an emerging Welsh poet. And yeah, another poetry collection by someone who taught me at university. This is Stowaway, a Levantine Adventure by Richard Gwynne, and this is like a weird non-linear kind of magical realist sort of sequence of poems, all set around the Levant, around the sort of Eastern Mediterranean, and it's kind of jumping forwards and backwards in time, and you're never really sure who or where the narrator is, but it's kind of fascinating, and it's one of those collections where you get to the last poem and you read the last line, and you kind of realise you've missed something but you're not sure what it is, and then you go to read it again and you just kind of get in a loop with it, which is great. Yeah, I was quite impressed with this. Oh, and this is another one of his collections. This is Sad Giraffe Cafe, which is a sort of prose poem collection. What else do we have? Ugh. This is The Iron Tonic by Edward Gorey, which is great. It's kind of that kind of bleak, I'm not sure if it's designed like for kids or not, but it's got these great sort of quirky illustrations. So yeah, just one of those books I like to leaf through sometimes. My brain is basically the illustrations in these poems. If you want to know what the inside of my brain looks like, it's this. Another Welsh poet. This is Rhian Edwards, and this is her debut collection, Clueless Dogs, which I thought was okay. And then there's also this sort of pamphlet she put out called Brood, which is mainly about kind of birds and magpies and things, and I actually found this to be stronger than her collection, and it's got some really beautiful, wonderful illustrations as well. So yeah, that's pretty good. This is a really good collection. This is Like by A.E. Starlings. For poets writing in form at the moment, I think A.E. Starlings is one of the sort of standout poets, and yeah, these are poems that are very, very wry, and they're kind of looking at the world from a very particular kind of angular, interesting view. And yeah, I mainly just bought this because I really enjoy the way she uses form, but she does have a very interesting voice, and the way she interacts with mythology, particularly Greek mythology, because I think she's also a classicist and she's an American living in Greece, and so mythology comes into everyday life in her poems, and it's really good. Then these are the selected poems of Dario I think Colombian poet, and yeah, he's becoming one of my favourite poets actually, the more I reread these selected poems. And then another Welsh poet, this is Tracy. This is a sort of pamphlet called Teaching a Bird to Sing, which is about her experience of bringing up her son, who is on the autistic spectrum. And I might share some of the poems from this in the future, particularly the first poem in here. I really love. So then we have Life on Mars by Tracy K. Smith. Yeah, really brilliant collection of poems, I thought, and yeah, there's just so much depth to this. I'll have to reread it, but yeah, it's just great. Another contemporary poet that I really enjoy is Kaveh Akbar, who is an Iranian-American poet, and this is Calling a Wolf a Wolf, sort of about addiction and recovery, and it's really good. There's a poem in here called River of Milk, which I really adore. And this is The Meat Tree by Gwyneth Lewis. Gwyneth Lewis, another Welsh poet. She's the poet who, at the Wales Millennium Centre, there's this sort of poem on the front of the building, and she wrote that poem. And it's in Welsh and in English, but it's not a translation, it's like two halves of the poem almost. And this is a retelling of one of the stories from the Mabinogion, and it's kind of moving it. It's kind of opposite. So in one of the stories there is a woman who's made out of flowers, and in this moves it the other way around, it's a tree made out of meat. Yeah, I haven't actually read it, so I think it's supposed to be like a sci-fi speculative fiction take on this old Welsh myth. Then we have Lunch Poems by Frank O'Hara, which I really enjoyed. Then we have The Captain's Verses by Pablo Neruda. I want to read more Pablo Neruda. I don't think this was maybe the best place to start, but yeah, they were quite good. And then Anna Akhmatova, she's come up a lot recently I think, but I really adored her selected poems. Here are the complete poems of Andrew Marvell. I haven't read this cover to cover yet, but I have enjoyed some of his poems. Then we have selected poetry of John Dunn. I read his mainly his songs and sonnets and the holy sonnets, and was kind of comparing them when I was at uni. So I'd love to read this cover to cover too, and read some of his other stuff, and yeah, see what I think of it. I think some of my favourites of his would be there's a poem called The Ecstasy, which I love, a great kind of love, a metaphysical love poem, and also Love's Alchemy is very funny too. William Carlos Williams, I didn't get quite as much out of this as I hoped, so maybe I need to revisit it. Another Welsh poet, this is Jillian Clarke. Yeah, she's really good, I would recommend her work. Then we have Emily Dickinson. I'd love to get her big, really big, fat, complete poems one day. Federico Garcia Lorca, his selected poems. This is a facing translation, so if I ever learn Spanish I could read the original, but I probably won't be able to learn Spanish. And then we have some Dylan Thomas. This is a Dylan Thomas treasury, so it's got some of his poems, some of his broadcasts and short stories in here, and then there's the definitive edition of Under Milkwood, which has Under Milkwood in it, but it has sort of extensive notes and a long introduction and things like that. And then this is just like both of those together in one volume. I think without the notes or anything like that, it's just most of his poetry, or yes, I think it's selections of his poetry and his short stories, broadcasts, and Under Milkwood. And yeah, it's really good. I want to spend more time with Dylan Thomas. He was one of those writers that I really took a liking to early on, and then kind of went off a bit, particularly when I was at university, and I was kind of trying to get back into him, and now I'm appreciating him more. So maybe some point this summer I can just enjoy some Dylan Thomas. And then we have The Temple by George Herbert, some very beautiful sort of religious, devotional poems. There's a poem in here called Easter Wings that I really love, and a few others. I think that they're very Anglican, which is very different to my own experience. Then we have, this is just the dust jacket for an Ezra Pound biography. I don't know why it's different, why the book isn't in it, but there you go. We'll probably find the book somewhere else. And probably the last one for today. This is another, well, it's not actually self-published. I think it's like a sort of charity published poetry collection. It's called Ode to a Titty, Poems of Life, Love and Laughter by Rebecca Simpson. And it's about a woman who has survived breast cancer and fought through it, and it's just about that. And it's sort of the collection was raising money for women in pink scarves, ladies in pink scarves even. So I think there we have it. That's part 2 of the poetry part of this tour, and I'll try and finish off the poetry next week. I know it's been going on a while, but yeah, there we have it, and I hope you're doing doing well. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks for bearing with me. I hope this worked. But yeah, I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye.